Hey folks, during the past couple of weeks, a saga has unfolded between Anthropic and the US government, and the consequences are going to be huge for Anthropic, and there is a possibility that Anthropic might even shut down as a company. So let's talk about what happened from A to Z. Let's get to the screen and I'll tell you more about what's going on. So we start all the way back in July 2025. Anthropic and the Department of Defense to advance responsible AI in defense operations. The US Department of Defense, through its Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, has awarded Anthropic a 2-year prototype other transaction agreement with a ceiling of $200 million. As a part of the agreement, Anthropic will prototype frontier AI capabilities that advance US national security. Okay, so in July last year, Anthropic signed a contract with the US government to deploy its systems in their military. Alright, now our commitment to responsible AI deployment. At the heart of this work lies our conviction that the most powerful technologies carry the greatest responsibility. We are building AI systems to be reliable, interpretable, and steerable precisely because we recognize that in government contexts where decisions affect millions and stakes couldn't be higher, these qualities are essential. We believe democracies must work together to ensure AI development strengthens democratic values globally by maintaining technological leadership to protect against authoritarian misuse. Now, this is the key point that is going to be the theme of this video. This is Anthropic's commitment, and as we will see, Anthropic is not going to budge from this. Okay, so this is what happened in July 2025. Anthropic and the Department of Defense signed an agreement. Now, let's fast forward to January of 2026, so just 2 months ago. Trump announces US military's capture of the Venezuela leader Maduro. President Donald J. Trump today announced the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro following a successful overnight joint US military extraction in Venezuela's capital of Caracas. Then we got reports that US military used Anthropic's AI model Claude in Venezuela raid, reports say, and Wall Street Journal says Claude used in operation via Anthropic's partnership with Palantir Technologies. So, Claude, the AI model developed by Anthropic, was used by US military during its operation to kidnap the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, the Wall Street Journal revealed on Saturday, a high-profile example of how the US Defense Department is using AI in its operations. The US raid on Venezuela involved bombing across the capital and the killing of 83 people. Keep this in mind. According to Venezuela's defense ministry, Anthropic's terms of use prevent the use of Claude for violent ends, for the development of weapons, or for conducting surveillance. Anthropic was the first AI developer known to be used in classified operation by the US Department of Defense. It was unclear how the tool, which has capabilities ranging from processing PDFs to piloting autonomous drones, was deployed. A spokesperson for Anthropic declined to comment on whether Claude was used in the operation, but said any use of the AI tool was required to comply with its usage policies. The US Defense Department did not comment on the claims. The Wall Street Journal cited anonymous sources who said Claude was used through Anthropic's partnership with Palantir Technologies, a contractor with the US Defense Department and federal law enforcement agencies. Palantir refused to comment on the claims. The US and other militaries increasingly deploy AI as part of their arsenals. Israel's military has used drones with autonomous capabilities in Gaza and has extensively used AI to fill its targeting bank in Gaza as well. The US military has used AI targeting for strikes in Iraq and Syria in recent years. Then it goes on, critics have warned against the use of AI in weapons technologies and the deployment of autonomous weapon systems, pointing to targeting mistakes created by computers governing who should and should not be killed. AI companies have grappled with how their technologies should engage with the defense sector, with Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei calling for regulation to prevent harms from the deployment of AI. Amade has also expressed wariness over the use of AI in autonomous lethal operations and surveillance in the US. This more cautious stance has apparently rankled the US Defense Department with the Secretary of War. This guy, keep him in mind, he is going to come up later on, saying in January that the department won't employ AI models that won't allow you to fight wars. The Pentagon announced in January that it would work with XAI owned by Elon Musk. The Defense Department also uses a custom version of Google's Gemini and OpenAI systems to support research. This is a very important article, and this is sort of what triggered the things that we are going to cover. Now, what happened is that the Pentagon's use of Claude during Maduro raid sparks a feud with Anthropic. Okay, so let's see what happened. The US military used Anthropic's Claude AI model during the operation to capture Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. Two sources with the knowledge of the situation told Axios. Now, the blowback may threaten the company's business with the Pentagon. The latest. After reports of the use of Claude in the raid, a senior administration official told Axios that the Pentagon would be re-evaluating its partnership with Anthropic. So what happened? Anthropic asked whether their software was used for the raid to capture Maduro, which caused real concerns across the Department of War, indicating that they might not approve if it was, the official said. Any company that would jeopardize the operational success of our warfighters in the field is the one we need to reevaluate our partnership with going forward. An Anthropic spokesperson denied that Anthropic has not discussed the use of Claude for specific operations with the Department of War. We have also not discussed this with any industry partners, including Palantir, outside of routine discussions on strictly technical matters. So, who reached out from Anthropic to the Department of War asking what did they use Claude models to capture Anthropic? Was Claude used? We don't know. Anthropic denied that they did not have any such discussion. But, well, this is what ended up triggering this debate within the Department of War. Why it matters. This episode highlights the tensions the major AI labs face as they enter into business with the military while trying to maintain some limitations on how their tools are used. AI models can quickly process data in real time, a capability prized by the Pentagon given the chaotic environments in which military operations take place. Axios could not confirm the precise role that Claude played in the operation to capture Maduro. The military has used Claude in the past to analyze satellite imagery or intelligence. The sources said Claude was used during the active operation, not just in the preparations for it. No Americans were killed in the raid, but Cuba and Venezuela both said dozens of their soldiers and security personnel were killed. The friction point is that the Pentagon wants the AI giants to allow them to use their models in any scenario, so long as they comply with the law. Anthropic, which has positioned itself as the safety-first AI leader, is currently negotiating with the Pentagon around its terms of use. The company wants to ensure, in particular, that its technology is not used for mass surveillance of Americans or to operate fully autonomous weapons. The company is confident the military has complied in all cases with its existing usage policy, which has additional restrictions. A source familiar with those discussions told Axios. Now, what are they saying? We cannot comment on whether Claude or any other AI model was used for any specific operation, classified or otherwise, an Anthropic spokesperson said. Any use of Claude, whether in the private or across government, is required to comply with our usage policies which govern how Claude can be deployed. We work closely with our partners to ensure compliance. But the Defense Secretary has leaned into AI and said he wants to integrate it into all aspects of the military's work, in part to stay ahead of China. Senior Pentagon officials have expressed frustration with Anthropic's posture on ensuring safeguards. A source familiar with these discussions said, "The big picture, though, is that Anthropic is one of the several major model makers that are working with Pentagon in various capacities. And as we saw earlier, OpenAI, Google, and XAI have all reached deals for military users to access their models without many of the safeguards that apply to ordinary users. It's unclear if any other models were used during the Venezuela operation. But the military's most sensitive work, from weapons testing to comms during active operations, happens on classified systems. For now, only Anthropic systems is available on the classified platforms. Anthropic also has a partnership with Palantir, the AI software firm that has extensive Pentagon contracts that allows it to use Claude within its security products. It's not clear that whether the use of Claude in the operation was tied to the Anthropic Palantir partnership. And discussions are ongoing between Pentagon and OpenAI, Google and XAI about allowing the use of their tools in classified systems. Anthropic and Pentagon are also in discussions about potentially loosening the restrictions on Claude. The last sentence leads us to our next story. So Anthropic had until February 27th. This article was published on February 24. Anthropic had until February 27th to back down on their AI safeguards. Defense Secretary has given Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei until Friday evening to give the military unfettered access to its AI model or face harsh penalties, Axios has learned. Hegseth told Amodei in a tense meeting on Tuesday that the Pentagon will either cut ties and declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, this is very important, or invoke the Defense Production Act to force the company tailor its model to the military's needs. Why this matters? The Pentagon wants to punish Anthropic as the feud over AI safeguards grows increasingly nasty, but officials are also worried about the consequences of losing access to its industry-leading model Claude. The only reason we are still talking to these people is we need them, and we need them now. The problem for these guys is that they are that good, a defense official told Axios. Anthropic has said that it is willing to adapt its usage policies for the Pentagon, but not to allow its models to be used for mass surveillance of Americans or the development of weapons that fire without human involvement. Anthropic's Claude is the only AI model currently used for military's most sensitive work. But a senior defense official said the meeting was not warm and fuzzy at all. Another source told Anthropic that it remains cordial with no voices raised on either side and that Hegseth praised Claude. And then Hegseth also told Amodei that he won't let any company dictate the terms under which the Pentagon makes operational decisions or object to individual use cases. Hegseth specifically mentioned in Pentagon's claim that Anthropic raised concerns to its partner Palantir over the use of Claude during the Maduro raid. Amodei denied that Anthropic raised any such concerns or even broached the topic with Palantir beyond standard operating conversations. He reiterated that the company's red lines have never prevented the Pentagon from doing its work or posed an issue for anyone operating in the field. In a sign of how seriously the Pentagon is taking this dispute, Hegseth was joined in the meeting by the Deputy Secretary, Under Secretary for Research and Engineering also joined, and so a lot of people joined the conversation. Anthropic continued to strike a conciliatory tone after the meeting. During the conversation, Dario Amodei expressed appreciation for the department's work and thanked the Secretary for his service. So, the Defense Production Act gives the President the authority to compel private companies to accept and prioritize particular contracts as required for national defense. It was used during the COVID-19 pandemic to increase production of vaccines and ventilators, for example. The law is rarely used in such a blatantly adversarial way. The idea would be to force Anthropic to adapt its model to Pentagon's needs without any safeguards. Anthropic could theoretically take the administration to court, arguing it's not providing the sort of commercially available product for which the DPA can be used to expedite production, but custom-built software already tailored to sensitive government users, according to one defense consultant. The Pentagon is also considering severing its contract with Anthropic and declaring the company a supply chain risk, which would create a plethora of other companies that work with the Pentagon to certify that Claude isn't used in their workflows. And this very point is the reason why Anthropic might shut down as a company, because there are so many companies usually. And if you sort of like look at the top 10 companies on Nasdaq, I think out of those 10 companies, 8 companies are using Claude, as we will see. And if Anthropic is classified as a supply chain risk, then what that means is that contractors, companies who are working directly with the US government, they will have to tell the government, inform them that they are not using Anthropic in any of their workflows. Well, but most of those top 10 companies on Nasdaq already have contracts with the US government, and all those 10 companies are all out of those 8 companies that are in contract with Anthropic currently, they are paying huge amounts of money to Anthropic, which is what fuels its business. That is the revenue that they are getting. Those huge sums of money would be lost if Anthropic is classified as a supply chain risk. Those 8 companies can no longer work with Anthropic, and if those 8 companies are no longer working, that means Anthropic won't be getting that money any longer. So what happens if it loses out on that money? Well, so cutting the ties would require the Pentagon to have a replacement ready for Claude, which is currently the only model used in classified systems. The use of Claude in the Venezuela operation came through Anthropic's partnership with Palantir. It's also used for a wide variety of more bureaucratic functions within the military. Well, but xAI recently signed a contract to bring its model Grok into the classified settings, though it's unclear whether it would be able to fully replace Claude. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, so this was published on February 24, and well, just a bit later, we have news that Anthropic dials back on its AI safety commitments. The company says that competitive pressure prompts it to pivot away from a more cautious stance. Anthropic's Claude AI. And this is where it gets kind of hilarious. Anthropic's Claude AI ran a vending machine at the Wall Street Journal headquarters for several weeks. It lost hundreds of dollars, bought some crazy stuff, and taught us a lot about the future of AI agents. Anyway, so what essentially ended up happening is that Anthropic is scaling back on its safety commitment. The company said Tuesday that it is softening its core safety policy to stay competitive with other AI labs. Anthropic previously paused development work on its model if it could be classified as dangerous, but said it would end that practice if a comparable or superior model was released by a competitor. These changes are a dramatic shift from 2.5 years ago, when the guardrails Anthropic published guiding the development and testing of its new models established the company as one of the most safety conscious players in the AI space. Anthropic faces intense competitions from rival labs, and which regularly release cutting-edge tools. It is also locked in a battle with the Defense Department over how its Claude tools are used after it told the Pentagon that they couldn't be used for domestic surveillance or autonomous lethal activities. So the company has until Friday to relax its usage policies. If Anthropic doesn't, it could lose its Pentagon contract or face other consequences. And then the further add-on, Anthropic said the safety policy change is an update based on the speed of AI's development and lack of federal AI regulations. Anthropic, which started as an AI safety research lab, has battled the Trump administration by advocating for state and federal rules on model transparency and guardrails. The Trump administration has sought to curb the state's ability to regulate AI. An Anthropic spokeswoman said the change is intended to help the company compete with several rivals against an uneven policy backdrop that puts the onus on companies to make their own judgments about safeguards. She said the safety pledge is unrelated to the Pentagon negotiations. The policy environment has shifted towards prioritizing AI competitiveness and economic growth, while safety-oriented discussions have yet to gain meaningful traction at the federal level, Anthropic said in a blog post announcing the changes. So this is what ended up happening. Anthropic sort of just said, hey, we are going to dial down on our safety commitments, but we are still not going to allow the Department of Defense to use Anthropic or the Claude models for autonomous lethal weapons or domestic surveillance of Americans. And well, they had until Friday to get back to the Department of Defense, and they ended up doing that on Thursday itself. Anthropic boss rejects Pentagon demand to drop AI safeguards. Anthropic has said it will not back down in its fight with the US Department of Defense over how its AI technology is used. The firm's executive said on Thursday that his company would rather not work with the Pentagon than agree to use of its tech that may undermine rather than defend democratic values. So, Dario Amade, the CEO of Anthropic, he actually put out a post on the department on their discussion on their discussions with the Department of War. So, I believe deeply in the existential importance of using AI to defend the US and other democracies and to defeat our autocratic adversaries. Anthropic has therefore worked proactively to deploy our models to the Department of War and the intelligence community. We were the first frontier AI company to deploy our models in the US government's classified networks, the first to deploy them at national laboratories, and the first to provide custom models for national security customers. Claude is extensively deployed across the Department of War and other national security agencies for mission critical applications such as intelligence analysis, modeling and simulation, operational planning, etc. Anthropic has also acted to defend America's lead in AI, even when it is against the company's short-term interest. We chose to forego several $100 million in revenue to cut off the use of Claude by firms linked to the Chinese Communist Party, both of which have been designated by the Department of War as Chinese military companies, shut down CCP-sponsored cyber attacks that attempted to abuse Claude, and have advocated for strong export controls on chips to ensure a democratic advantage. Anthropic understands that the Department of War, not private companies, makes military decisions. We have never raised objections to particular military operations nor attempted to limit use of our technology in an ad hoc manner. However, in a narrow set of cases, we believe AI can undermine rather than defend democratic values. Some uses are also simply outside the bounds of what today's technology can safely and reliably do. Two such use cases have never been included in our contracts with the Department of War, and we believe they should not be included now, which is mass domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. So he says that we support the use of AI for lawful foreign intelligence and counterintelligence missions, but using these systems for mass domestic surveillance is incompatible with democratic values. AI-driven mass surveillance presents serious novel risks to our fundamental liberties. To that extent that such surveillance is currently legal, this is only because the law has not yet caught up with the rapidly growing capabilities of AI. For example, under current law, the government can purchase the detailed records of American movements, web browsing, and associations from public sources without obtaining a warrant, a practice which the intelligence community has acknowledged, raises privacy concerns, and that has generated bipartisan opposition in Congress. Powerful AI makes it possible to assemble the scattered, individually innocuous data into a comprehensive picture of any person's life, automatic and at massive scale. So he's clearly explaining how data that is just scattered, AI can just maybe, like, let's say they can collect data of your social media accounts, your voting history, etc., and they can just use all that scattered data, feed it to an AI model, and use that to know more about you. And then we have fully autonomous weapons. Partially autonomous weapons like those used today in Ukraine are vital to the defense of democracy. Even fully autonomous weapons, those that take humans out of the loop entirely and automate selecting and engaging targets, may prove critical for our national defense. But today, frontier AI systems are simply not reliable enough to power fully autonomous weapons. We will not knowingly provide a product that puts America's warfighters and civilians at risk. We have offered to work directly with the Department of War on R&D to improve the reliability of these systems, but they have not accepted this offer. In addition, without proper oversight, fully autonomous weapons cannot be relied upon to exercise the critical judgment that our highly trained professional troops exert exhibit every day. They need to be deployed with proper guardrails, which don't exist today. To our knowledge, these two exceptions have not been a barrier to accelerating the adoption and use of our models within our armed forces to date. The Department of War has stated that they will only contract with AI companies who accede to any lawful use and remove safeguards in the cases mentioned above. They have threatened to remove us from their systems if we maintain these safeguards. They have also threatened to designate us as a supply chain risk, a label reserved for US adversaries, never before applied to an American company. This is a very important point, that this has never been applied to any American company. And to invoke the Defense Production Act to force the safeguards removal. These latter two threats are inherently contradictory. One labels as a security risk, the other labels Claude as essential to national security. So you see the irony. Regardless, these threats do not change our position. We cannot, in good conscience, accede to their request. So here is Dario Amade denying to the request from the Department of Defense that no, they won't backtrack on the guardrails that are in Claude. They will scale them back as reported here, but they won't sort of remove them completely and allow the US military to use Claude models for autonomous, for either mass surveillance or for deployment of autonomous weapons without a human in the loop. It is the department's prerogative to select contractors most aligned with their vision, but given the substantial value that Anthropic's technology provides to our armed forces, we hope they reconsider. Our strong preference is to continue to serve the department and our warfighters with our two requested safeguards in place. Should the department choose to offboard Anthropic, we will work to enable a smooth transition to another provider, avoiding any disruption to ongoing military planning, operations, or any critical missions. Our models will be available on the expansive terms we have proposed for as long as required. We remain ready to continue our work to support the national security of the US. Well, you might be wondering if AI is powerful enough. Well, it actually is. See this headline. AI-powered hacker steals 150 GB from Mexican government using Anthropic's Claude models. Stealing 195 million taxpayer records shouldn't be this easy. Yet, one hacker just proved that Anthropic's Claude models that makes government data theft almost routine. Between December 2025 and January 26, an unknown attacker exploited the popular AI chatbot to automate cyber attacks against multiple Mexican agencies, walking away with 150 GB of sensitive data, including voter records, employee credentials, and civil registry files. This breach reads like a cyberpunk fever dream, but the method was disturbingly simple. The hacker jailbroke Claude by framing malicious requests as a bug bounty security program, convincing the AI to act as an elite hacker. Once fooled, Claude produced thousands of detailed attack plans with ready-to-execute scripts specifying exact targets and credentials needed. So, well, here's a tweet which outlines what ended up happening. Hackers used Anthropic's Claude to steal 150 GB of Mexican government data. Tell Claude you are doing a bug bounty. Claude initially refused. Then that violates safety guidelines. Hacker just kept asking. Claude said, okay, I'll help. And then they ended up hacking the Mexican government, getting the data from Mexican government. And then when Claude hit limits, the attacker switched to ChatGPT for lateral movement and evasion tactics, turning two consumer AI tools into a sophisticated hacking arsenal. This tag team approach leveraged each platform's strengths while bypassing their individual safeguards. In total, it produced thousands of detailed reports that included ready-to-execute plans telling the human operator exactly which internal targets to attack next and what credentials to use. And then the Israeli cybersecurity firm identified at least 20 vulnerabilities exploited across Mexico's Federal Tax Authority, National Electoral Institute, and the state governments in these Mexican regions. Anthropic moved quickly once alerted, banning involved accounts and enhancing its Claude Opus 4.6 model. This is the latest flagship model from Anthropic with better misuse detection. OpenAI confirmed the policy violations were refused by their systems, yet Mexican officials remain divided, and the Jalisco state denied any breaches, while the Electoral Institute reported no unauthorized access. So, your government's digital infrastructure just became collateral damage in AI's democratization of cybercrime. This attack proves that sophisticated hacking no longer requires years of training, just creative prompting and consumer grade AI tools. As these models grow more capable, the line between helpful assistant and weaponized intelligence continues to blur, leaving legacy government systems dangerously exposed. So, that is the power that Claude models or any flagship AI model can have for that matter. Now, let's take a look at what ended up happening. Pentagon moves to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk. So, the US government ended up doing that, and they also released this statement. This is the statement from Donald Trump. The United States of America will never allow a radical theft woke company to dictate how our great military fights and wins wars. That decision belongs to your commander-in-chief and the tremendous leaders I appoint to run our military. So, therefore, I am directing every federal agency in the US government to immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. We don't need it, we don't want it, and will not do business with them again. There will be a 6-month phase-out period for agencies like the Department of War who are using Anthropic's products at various levels. Anthropic better get their act together and be helpful during this phase-out period, or I will use the full power of the presidency to make them comply with major civil and criminal consequences to follow. We will decide the fate of our country, not some out-of-control, radical left AI company run by people who have no idea what the real world is all about. Thank you for your attention. So, Anthropic became the first American company to be labeled as a supply chain risk. And this is huge, like I mentioned. After this situation unfolded, employees at Google and OpenAI supported Anthropic's Pentagon stand in an open letter. Anthropic has reached a stalemate with the US Department of War over the military's request for unrestricted access to the company's technology. But as the Pentagon's Friday afternoon deadline for Anthropic's compliance approaches, more than 300 Google employees and over 60 OpenAI employees have signed an open letter urging the leaders of their companies to support Anthropic and refuse this unilateral use. Specifically, Anthropic stood in opposition to the use of AI for domestic mass surveillance and autonomous weaponry. The open letter's signatories seek to encourage their employers to put aside their differences and stand together to uphold the boundaries that Anthropic has asserted. They are trying to divide each company with fear that the other will give in, the letter says. That strategy only works if none of us know where the others stand. The letter specifically calls on executives at Google and OpenAI to maintain Anthropic's red lines against mass surveillance and fully automated weaponry. We hope our leaders will put aside their differences and stand together to continue to refuse the Department of War's current demands. Agreed, mass surveillance violates the Fourth Amendment and has a chilling effect on the freedom of expression. Surveillance systems are prone to misuse for political or discriminatory purposes. But what ended up happening is going to be actually different, as we will see. Leaders at the companies have not yet formally responded to the letter. TechCrunch has reached out to Google and OpenAI for comments. However, informal statements suggest that both companies are sympathetic to Anthropic's side of the case. In an interview with CNBC on Friday morning, OpenAI CEO said that he doesn't personally think the Pentagon should be threatening DPA against these companies. According to a CNN reporter, an OpenAI spokesperson confirmed that the company shares Anthropic's red lines against autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. Google DeepMind has not formally addressed the conflict, but their chief scientist, presumably speaking as an individual, did express opposition to mass surveillance by the government. And then, according to an Axios report, the military currently can use Grok Google's Gemini and OpenAI's ChatGPT for unclassified tasks, and has been negotiating with Google and OpenAI to bring its technology over for use in classified work. While Anthropic has an existing partnership with the Pentagon, the company has remained firm in maintaining the boundary that its AI can't be used for mass surveillance or autonomous weaponry. Then, Defense Secretary told Anthropic CEO that if his company doesn't concede, the Pentagon will either declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, which we already saw they had done, and then Anthropic, the CEO, just ended up giving the statement which we have already taken a look at. Well, and what happens the next day? This is February 28th, by the way, and the deadline for Anthropic to agree to the Department of Defense's demands was February 27. A day later, OpenAI's Sam Altman announces Pentagon deal with technical safeguards. So let's see what happened. OpenAI CEO announced late on Friday that his company has reached an agreement allowing the Department of Defense to use the AI models in the department's classified network. This follows a high-profile standoff between the Department of Defense, also known under the Trump administration as the Department of War, and OpenAI's rival Anthropic. The Pentagon pushed AI companies, including Anthropic, to allow their models to be used for all lawful purposes, while Anthropic sought to draw a red line across mass domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. In a lengthy statement released on Thursday, Anthropic CEO said that the company would never raise objections to particular military operations nor attempted to limit use of technology in an ad hoc manner. But he argued that in a narrow set of cases, we believe AI can undermine rather than defend democratic values. And then, as we saw, OpenAI and Google employees signed that letter. After Anthropic and the Pentagon refused to reach an agreement, President Donald Trump criticized Anthropic, as we saw. And then in a separate post, the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, claimed that Anthropic was trying to seize veto power over the operational decisions of the US military. Hegseth also said that he is designating Anthropic as a supply chain risk, that we already saw. On Friday, Anthropic said that it has not yet received direct communication from the Department of War or the White House on the status of negotiations, but insisted it would challenge any supply chain risk designation in court. So, Anthropic will take them to court. Sure. Surprisingly, Altman claimed, Sam Altman is the OpenAI CEO, claimed in a post on Twitter that OpenAI's new defense contract includes the protections addressing the same issues that became a flashpoint for Anthropic. That is a bit contradictory, isn't it? So, the US Department of Defense or the Department of War claims that only Claude models have proven very useful so far. They were the only model providers. OpenAI was there before Anthropic even sprung to life. Google's Gemini models are also there. There is XAI's Grok. Yet only Anthropic's Claude models are currently being used in the department or by the Department of Defense. Yet they didn't concede to demands made by Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei that they just don't want Claude models to be used for mass surveillance or for domestic surveillance. These were just two of the small demands that they had. And instead, what they chose to do is onboard a completely new vendor. They are ready to sort of rework the entire system from the ground up to use OpenAI's models instead of Claude. And they are also accommodative of those two claims of the two things that Anthropic didn't want them to do. How surprising is that? Isn't that really weird? But let's go on. Two of our most important safety principles are prohibitions on domestic mass surveillance and human responsibility for the use of force, including for autonomous weapon systems, Altman said. The Department of War agrees with these principles, reflects them in law and policy, and we put them into our agreement. Altman says that OpenAI will build technical safeguards to ensure our models behave as they should, which the Department of War also wanted, and it will deploy engineers with the Pentagon to help with our models and to ensure their safety. We are asking the Department of War to offer these same terms to all AI companies, which in our opinion, we think everyone should be willing to accept. We have expressed our strong desire to see these things de-escalate away from legal and government actions and towards reasonable agreements. Then Fortune reports that Altman told OpenAI employees at an all-hands meeting that the government will allow the company to build its own safety stack to prevent misuse, and that if the model refuses to do a task then the government would not force OpenAI to make it to do that task. Altman's post came shortly before the news broke out that US and Israeli governments have begun bombing Iran, with Trump calling for the overthrow of the Iranian government. Now, is it just me, or does this news seem a bit weird? Like, how this doesn't make sense, does it? Why would sort of the Department of War agree to go through this entire laborious process of deboarding Anthropic and then just onboarding OpenAI with the very safeguards that Anthropic asked to be there from the get-go? Why not just let Anthropic have its way and implement those two safeguards? Wouldn't that be the easier way out? So something definitely seems off. And what ended up happening is that not just OpenAI, Musk's xAI and Pentagon also reached deals to use Grok in classified systems. Then, what ended up happening, surprisingly, is that ChatGPT continues to lose market share. OpenAI sold out to the Department of War. There was a 295% uninstall surge in one day, 1-star reviews up by almost 800%, 5-star reviews down by 50%. Meanwhile, Anthropic says no. Cloud downloads go up by 81%. It passes ChatGPT in downloads, hates #1 on the App Store. So, and then there's this graph which shows how sort of Claude overtook ChatGPT. So, and then there are headlines which confirm the same. Anthropic's Claude rises to number 1 following the Pentagon dispute. Anthropic's chatbot Claude seems to have benefited from the attention around the company's fraught negotiations with the Pentagon. As first reported by CNBC, Claude has been rising to the top of the free app rankings in the Apple US App Store. On Saturday evening, it overtook ChatGPT to claim the number 1 position. So that's what. Then in a bid to sort of diffuse the fire, OpenAI shared more details about its agreement with the Pentagon. Or OpenAI Sam Altman's own admission, OpenAI's deal with the Department of Defense was definitely rushed and the optics don't look good. After negotiations between Anthropic and the Pentagon fell through on Friday, Donald Trump directed federal agencies to stop using Claude models and there was a 6-month transition period. Then OpenAI quickly announced that it had reached a deal of its own models to be deployed in classified environments, with Anthropic saying it was drawing red lines around the use of its technology in fully autonomous weapons or mass domestic surveillance. Altman saying OpenAI had the same red lines. There were some obvious questions. Was OpenAI being honest about its safeguards? Why was it able to reach a deal while Anthropic was not? So, as OpenAI executives defended the agreement on social media, the company also published a blog post outlining its approach. In fact, the post pointed to 3 areas where it said OpenAI's models cannot be used: mass domestic surveillance, autonomous weapon systems, and high-stakes automated decisions, example systems such as social credit. The company said that in contrast to other AI companies that have reduced or removed their safeguards and relied primarily on usage policies as their primary safeguards in national security deployments, OpenAI's agreement protects the red lines through a more expansive, multi-layered approach. We retain full discretion over the safety stack. We deploy it via cloud, cleared OpenAI personnel are in the loop, and we have strong contractual protections. The blog said this is all addition to the strong existing protections in the US law. The company added, we don't know why Anthropic could not reach this deal, and we hope that they and more labs will consider it. So that's where they left it at. Okay. And then Sam Altman even sort of did an AMA session where he was like, hey, let me know any questions that you have and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay. And if I just open his profile, he also did sort of some takeaways from 3 journal things from this AMA. There is more debate than I thought would be, or at least in this part of Twitter, about whether we should prefer a democratically elected government or unelected private companies to have more power. I guess this is something people disagree on, but I don't. This seems like an important area for more discussion. I think this is a question behind a lot of the questions, but I haven't seen this quite articulate. What happens if the government tries to nationalize OpenAI or other AI efforts? I obviously don't know. I have thought about it, of course. It has seemed to me for a long time it might be better if building AGI was a government project, but it doesn't seem super likely on the current trajectory. That said, I do think a close partnership between governments and companies building this technology is super important. Third, people take their safety in the national security sense more for granted than I realize, which I think is a good thing on balance, but I don't think shows enough respect to the tremendous work it takes for that to happen. Also, I am on the whole very grateful for the very reasonable and good faith engagement. It was not what I expected. So, well, that's what happened. Then, ironically, Claude was used by US in Iran strikes. Iranian missiles hit an AWS data center. Anthropic runs Claude on AWS, and then Claude had been down for a couple of hours earlier today. So yeah, that's just a bit thing that was just ironic. Now, has this happened before? Have we seen a similar situation being played out a couple of years ago? Let's say a decade ago. It has actually. Anthropic is executing the most effective consumer brand strategy in AI, and every move has been deliberate. 2 weeks ago, Super Bowl ads mocking ChatGPT's ads pushed Claude from 41st to 7th position on the App Store. Then they publicly refused Pentagon demands to remove safeguards on mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Today, Claude sits at second across all apps. Katy Perry is drawing hearts around their subscription page, 6.2 million views on a single tweet. So this is the tweet in question, and that ended up getting almost 6.2 million views. Okay. This is the Apple versus FBI playbook from 2016 running at 10x speed. When the FBI ordered Apple to build a backdoor into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone, Tim Cook published an open letter refusing. Critics called Apple unpatriotic. The DOJ accused them of prioritizing brand marketing strategy over national security. Apple's response cemented a privacy-first brand identity that powered the next decade of iPhone sales and made what happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone their defining consumer promise. Anthropic just compressed that entire arc into 2 weeks. Pentagon demands unrestricted access. Anthropic says no to mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Trump calls them left-wing nut jobs. Defense Secretary labels them a supply chain risk, a designation normally reserved for foreign adversaries like Huawei. And consumers respond by downloading the app so fast that it climbs 39 spots on the App Store. Now look at what OpenAI did. Within hours of Anthropic getting blacklisted, Sam Altman announced a Pentagon deal on X. He claimed the same red lines on surveillance and autonomous weapons. The Pentagon accepted them without a fight. This tells you the Pentagon's dispute with Anthropic was never about the policy. It was about politics. OpenAI got the same terms Anthropic asked for. The difference is OpenAI played the game quietly while Anthropic made it public. And that difference is exactly what creates the brand divergence. OpenAI is becoming the institutional default. Ads in ChatGPT, Pentagon contracts announced on Friday nights. Revenue optimized across every channel. Anthropic is becoming the product people choose because they trust it. That's the split that matters in consumer tech. The company that optimizes for institutional relationships eventually loses the users. The company that earns consumer trust compounds it. Ask Microsoft how the 2000s went when they had every enterprise contract and Google had the love. Every Fortune 500 general counsel is now asking whether Claude creates Pentagon exposure risk. But 37,000 people liked the pop star's screenshot of a subscription page. One of those dynamics creates enterprise friction. The other creates a movement, and movements sell more than subscription than government contracts ever will. I love this tweet, and I think it articulated what's going to happen, how the situation is going to pan out really well. But for that, Anthropic has to stay alive. Will it? Let's take a look. So before we do that, and this is the final article that we will go through, I actually did want to share that, well, not everything is rose and gold with Anthropic. They have also made some mistakes. Like, for example, a lot of lawsuits have been brought against them. There was this lawsuit in 2024 where a group of authors sued Anthropic in a federal court in California. They alleged that the company used pirated copies of their books to train its AI models without permission or compensation. A judge ruled that some of Anthropic's use of books for training could be considered fair use, but its storage of pirated copies was infringing. The case was set for trial on damages and related to that piracy, and in September they ended up reaching a settlement. Anthropic agreed to pay about $1.5 billion, almost $3,000 per book, to resolve the author's claims pending court approval. Then similarly, there were copyright lawsuits from music publishers. There was a lawsuit from Reddit, and then there have also been lawsuits that have been brought against them in India. For example, a small Indian software firm has sued Anthropic, seeking an injunction to stop it from using the name Anthropic, claiming prior use of the trademark within India. So yeah, they do have some legal battles that they have to deal with, and yeah, how they pan out is eventually remains to be seen. But yeah, they did sort of wrongfully train their AI models, but I guess every AI company ended up doing that. Some of them reached a settlement, some of them sort of made partnerships in other ways, but all in all, money was involved. So now let's get to this final article. Anthropic versus the Pentagon, what's actually at stake. The past 2 weeks have been defined by a clash between Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei and the Defense Secretary as the two battle over the military's use of AI. Anthropic refuses to allow its AI models to be used for mass surveillance or for autonomous weapons that conduct strikes without human input. At the same time, Secretary of Defense has argued the Department of Defense shouldn't be limited by the rules of a vendor, arguing that any lawful use of the technology should be permitted. On Thursday, Amodei publicly signaled that Anthropic isn't backing down, despite threats that his company could be designated as a supply chain risk. But with the news cycle moving fast, it is worth revisiting exactly what's at stake. What is Anthropic worried about? As we said above, Anthropic doesn't want its AI models to be used for mass surveillance of Americans or for autonomous weapons with no humans in the loop for targeting and firing decisions. Traditional defense contractors typically have little say in how their products will be used. But Anthropic has argued from its inception that AI technology poses unique risks and therefore requires unique safeguards. From the company's perspective, the question is how to maintain those safeguards when the technology is being used by the military. The US military already relies on highly automated systems, some of which are lethal. The decision to use lethal force has historically been left to humans, but there are few legal restrictions on the military's use of autonomous weapons. The Department of Defense doesn't categorically ban fully autonomous weapons. According to the 2023 DoD directive, AI systems can select and engage targets without human intervention, as long as they meet certain standards and pass review by senior defense officials. That's precisely what makes Anthropic nervous. Military technology is secretive by nature, so if the US military were taking steps to automate lethal decision making, we might not know about it until it was operational. And if it used Anthropic's model, it could count as lawful use. Anthropic's position isn't that such uses should be permanently off the table. It's that its models aren't capable enough to support them safely yet. Imagine an autonomous system misidentifying a target, escalating a conflict without human authorization, or making a split-second lethal decision that no one can reverse. But put a less capable AI in charge of weapons and you get a very fast, very confident machine that's bad at making high-stake calls. AI also has the power to supercharge lawful surveillance of American citizens to a very concerning degree. Under current US laws, surveillance of American citizens is already possible, whether through collection of texts, emails, and other communication. AI changes the equation by enabling automated large-scale pattern detection, entity resolution across data sets, predictive risk scoring, and continuous behavioral analysis. Like we saw, a lot of scattered data, but if you feed it to an AI, then it becomes recognizable, it becomes identifiable, and that can be tied to you. And that's the very risk of mass surveillance. What does the Pentagon want? The Pentagon's argument is that it should be able to deploy Anthropic's technology for any lawful use it deems necessary, rather than be limited by Anthropic's internal policies on things like an autonomous weapon or surveillance. More specifically, The Secretary of Defense has argued that the department shouldn't be limited by the rules of a vendor and that it would engage in lawful use of the technology. Sean Parnell, the Pentagon's chief spokesperson, said in a Twitter post on Thursday that the department has no interest in conducting mass domestic surveillance or deploying autonomous weapons. Here's what we are asking. Allow the Pentagon to use Anthropic's model for all lawful purposes. This is a simple, common sense request that will prevent Anthropic from jeopardizing critical military operations and potentially putting our warfighters at risk. We will not let any company dictate the terms regarding how we make operational decisions. He added that Anthropic has until 5 p.m. on Friday to decide. Otherwise, we will terminate our partnership with Anthropic and deem them a supply chain risk for the Department of War. Despite the DoD stance that it simply doesn't believe it should be limited by a corporation's usage policies, Secretary of Defense of the Defense Department, Hexeth, concerns about Anthropic have at times seemed connected to cultural grievance. In a speech at SpaceX and XAI offices in January, Hexeth rallied against woke AI in a speech that some saw as a preview of his feud with Anthropic. Department of War AI will not be woke. Hexeth said, we are building war-ready weapons and systems, not chatbots for an Ivy League faculty launch. So what happens now? The Pentagon has threatened to either declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, which effectively blacklists Anthropic from doing business with the government, or invoke the Defense Production Act to force the company to tailor its models to the military's needs. And then we have this deadline that was given to Anthropic to respond. But with the deadline approaching, it's anyone's guess whether the Pentagon will make good on its threat. This is not a fight either party can easily walk away from. A VC at so Sachin said, who is a VC who focuses on defense tech, says a supply chain risk label for Anthropic could mean lights out for the company, and I have explained why. However, he said if Anthropic is dropped from the DoD, it could be a national security issue. The department would have to wait 6 to 12 months for either OpenAI or XAI to catch up. This leaves a window for up to a year where they might not be working from not the best model, but the second or third best. XAI is gearing up to become classified ready and replace Anthropic, and it's fair to say that given their owner Elon Musk's rhetoric on the matter, that the company would have no problem giving the DoD total control over its technology. Recent reports indicate that OpenAI may stick to the same red lines. So we have already taken a look at that. So yeah, this is why it's going to be very, very, very tough for Anthropic to sort of make its way back. What if it ends up losing on all that billions of dollars of revenue that it is getting? It's like sweeping the carpet underneath your feet. So like if they don't have the revenue, how would they train their models? How would they sort of keep up with their operational costs? How will they sort of pay the electricity bills? How will they run the GPUs? How will they pay their employees, etc., etc.? And you can kind of see how this can wind down and actually end up impacting the very existence, the very core of the company. So I'm not very sure what the future holds. That is something we will see together. But yes, Anthropic is at risk, and they do risk their existence as a company. But yeah, let's be hopeful. Obviously, the positive that has emerged from this is that there is more awareness, more people are using Claude, and I feel that Anthropic will end up becoming the Apple of the AI world. They will, if we will think about privacy, if we will think about ethics, and ethics are going to be very important, I feel, going into the future in the AI world. If as consumers we will think that, okay, this company is going to keep up to their word, then yes, it will be Anthropic. It won't be OpenAI or it won't be Google. It will be Anthropic because of the gutsy decision that they made, that they upheld their values, their ethics over some contract. So yeah, but yes, at the end of the day, AI models are very expensive to run. AI development in general in itself is very expensive. At the end of the day, you also have to ask where will they get that money from. So yeah, I guess we will see. that's about it from this video. I hope you found this video helpful. I will link all the sources down below. I know I just read the articles, but I just wanted to give you a complete narrative of what exactly is going on, so you can sort of just make up your mind on what's happening, and you can develop your own mindset. So personally, I feel that Anthropic made the right call, but the future of the company is still dicey. But we will see what happens. So that's about it. I hope you found this video helpful. If that was the case, you know the drill: like, subscribe, follow, etc., etc. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Again, all the sources will be linked down below in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.